You ever have those moments where you look back at something you did and think, I cannot believe we actually pulled that off? This is one of those. It's a throwback to the mid-90s, when floppy disks were a currency and the internet was still a weird science experiment. If you remember dial-up, copy-protected floppies, and shrines to Queen in bedrooms, you'll get the vibe. There weren't many PC gamers where I lived. Games were expensive, and stores didn't stock much. My buddy and I used to buy games from abroad by airmail, real, proper waiting for weeks packages. We treated originals like gold. We'd trade them, copy the copy protection when we could. Yes, piracy was complicated and messy back then, and swap games so we both got to play the latest stuff without bankrupting our allowances. We had the Settlers, Doom 2, Monkey Island, all that good stuff. We weren't saints, but we were careful, and we respected the unwritten rules of the little PC circle we had. Then this new kid joined our class. New kid had an uncle who had tons of games, like secret stash level amounts. He showed up one day with a floppy bag and immediately became the golden kid. Everyone wanted him in their trading loop. We figured, cool, more games for everyone. He seemed nice enough at first, quiet, a bit smug, like he thought he had a monopoly on fun that we offered trades. We let him copy our originals because that's how trades worked. You let the person create a backup, and either they gave you a working copy in return or they didn't. At first it was fine, but then the returns started coming back corrupted, floppies that wouldn't boot, missing copy protection files, half-blank labels, games that froze 5 minutes in. He kept the originals and handed us trash. He even returned some discs warped or filthy. After a couple months of this, we had literally not received a single working game from him. He, meanwhile, had every title we'd traded, and he was playtesting them like he'd found holy artifacts. It was infuriating because you depend on trust with that kind of trading. It wasn't just about the money, it was the principle. He'd fucked us over, not in a melodramatic way, but in a small, petty, constant slow burn way that adds up. Now this kid also had the personality of someone who used other people's kindness as a vending machine. He liked making fun of things he thought were weak, and apparently liking Queen made you a target. I was a huge Queen fan, still am, and he would shit on Freddie Mercury at every chance. He came from a very conservative, religious family, and that fed into his obnoxious, performative homophobia. He'd toss the word gay around like a grenade, think it was hilarious, and then go home to a house that probably taught him nothing about empathy. Around that time, our school held an AIDS awareness event. This was the early mid-90s, when the hysteria and public awareness campaigns after Freddie Mercury's death were still a big deal. Pamphlets, lectures, posters. We all had to attend. At the end, the foundation handing out materials gave the class flyers, information booklets, and free condoms with the foundation's logo. It wasn't given with any drama, just educational stuff, totally standard. But to a kid from a conservative family, the optics of something like that landing in the home looked like the plot of a daytime soap. My friend and I, being two of the only kids around with an inkjet printer and a little technical know-how, started to cook up ideas. The theft of our games had put us simmering at low boil. Every joke he made about Queen was salt in the wound. We wanted to get back at him without just starting a fight. We weren't geniuses, just annoyed teenagers with access to a printer and a mailing address. The prank we landed on felt, at the time, like poetic justice. It was personal, humiliating, and would hit a nerve because of what we knew about his home life, that we knew the risks. We knew that it could blow up. But in teenage logic, the adrenaline and the excellent pettiness of the idea trumped empathy. In hindsight, we had blinders on. Revenge felt righteous and funny. We spent the next days quietly crafting something that looked official, something that would make his parents see him differently, at least for a little while. We copied logos, used the right paper, printed the tone and style you'd expect from a health foundation letter. It needed to be believable if we wanted to make the point that screwing over people had consequences. By the time we were done, we had a single envelope addressed to Mr. Last name, so the father would open it first. We slipped in the pamphlets and, because we could, a couple of the condoms from the event. We took turns watching the mailbox from a safe distance the day the letter went out, acting casual like nothing was happening. You can feel the teenage ridiculousness here. It's equal parts cowardice and mischief. That's how part one of this story closes, with us sending something that would tear a small crack into the family's perception of their son. Thinking we were finally getting justice for corrupted floppies, that we mailed the letter and then did the kind of thing every kid thinks is hilarious. We waited for the fallout. We didn't storm the house or anything dramatic. We just lingered around school being subtle little vultures. A few days after the letter, things escalated in a way none of us fully expected. It started with the mother. She found the envelope, opened it, and immediately went to pieces. There was weeping, there was screaming. It wasn't the theatrical, movie-type yelling. It was raw and entire family-level chaos. The dad was furious, not just because of the content, but because of the idea of family shame. The kid got grounded hard. Suddenly, he had fewer privileges than a time-locked vault. Friends weren't allowed over. He had to explain himself to his parents, repeatedly, while they asked questions that made him freeze up, that we hadn't planned for how his parents would react emotionally. We'd been aiming for humiliation and inconvenience, not full-on family meltdown. But teen brain is rarely calibrated for consequences, and once the thing is out there, it tilts the whole house. The kid who'd been mocking me for liking Freddie was now at the center of a storm that he didn't know how to extinguish. The thing we'd intended as a punch landed like an explosive, more damaging than the small, perfect revenge we'd fantasized about at school. Rumors started like slow leaks. People who had seen his parents yelling talked. People who didn't know him speculated. The letter had done exactly what we'd hoped in one sense. It forced the family to confront something, real or imagined. For him, it was humiliating and scary. For us, it was a rush of "we made it happen," mixed with a tightening knot of guilt that none of us mentioned. Teenagers don't usually consider how intense adult emotions can get when their children's reputations are at stake. We were wrapped up in the petty victory. He'd been screwing people over for months, and we finally had our smackdown. At first, he thought the letter was legit. If you're a kid and a letter arrives with a credible-looking logo and an authoritative tone, why wouldn't you believe it? He tried to handle it the only way he knew, deny everything, then scramble when his parents dug in. But then suspicion pointed at us. Why? Because we were among the few with printers, and because we'd been the ones most invested in trading games with him. We had been probing after the letter went out to see if he'd been punished. You could say our curiosity was obvious. The confession came later. We got cornered, not violently but carefully, by the principal, with his parents there. That's the kind of scene that collapses fantasy and reality. The principal was less amused than we had hoped. He didn't care about our petty rationale. He wanted a clear explanation and an apology that sounded sincere. The father, furious and still humiliated, wanted consequences. We were dragged into a meeting where our prank looked juvenile and dangerous in the eyes of adults that we confessed. We tried to explain. The games, the corrupted floppies, the insults about Queen, the feeling of being taken advantage of. We try to make it sound like context rather than an excuse. The principal lectured, the father fumed, and the mother wept on and off in the room like grief folded into anger. There were detentions, apologies, and the kind of "you're lucky we're not pressing charges" talk that makes you feel both guilty and vindicated. In the end, no legal action was taken, mostly because the prank itself hadn't broken laws in a clear-cut way, but the social damage had already been done. The kid had been humiliated at home and embarrassed at school that we'd wanted to teach him a lesson. We did. But the lesson was messier than revenge porn fantasies make it seem. The kid wasn't an angel after. He was more wary, more careful, and for a while, more resentful. It didn't fix the stolen games. It didn't return anything. What it did do was mark us as kids who were willing to go hard. People noticed. Our social currency shifted. For a time, we carried a reputation for being petty and clever in equal measure that it's worth being honest. The thrill of seeing your target squirm is immediate and intoxicating. When you're 15 and someone who's been an asshole for months finally looks small, your brain treats it like catharsis. But there's always that aftertaste, the knowledge that you made someone's family hurt. We had mapped out a perfect prank, but none of us had measured the fault lines inside someone else's home. In the principal's office, the panic in his mom's voice stuck with me. It felt like a moral sting I couldn't scrub off. After the confession, things cooled. We were punished with a mix of suspension time and community service type stuff the school used for pranks gone wrong. The kid got his own consequences at home. He avoided us mostly, which was fine. He never fully apologized for the corrupted floppies, and honestly, we lost interest in the whole game's trade after that. We'd made a point and then watched it metastasize into something larger than we'd intended. There's a weird double life to acts like that. To people outside the immediate fallout, you become a legend. To the people inside the fallout, you become an asshole. Both things were true for us. 4 years at school, the story did the rounds. The kids who forged a fake AIDS Foundation letter to humiliate a classmate, and it was told with a mixture of awe and disgust, depending on who you asked. It's been more than 30 years since that afternoon we mailed a letter and set off a small hurricane. Time and distance let you examine things with a cleaner lens. If you asked 15-year-old me whether I'd do it again, he'd have said yes in a heartbeat. Revenge tastes righteous when you're the one being wronged. But the 30 years older version of me knows more complicated truths. First, revenge that targets someone's identity, even by accident, is a different class of harm. We aim to expose hypocrisy and take down a smug thief. We didn't aim to weaponize an identity against him. But that's exactly what happened. We made his parents believe something about their son that they thought would carry social shame in their value system. That's heavy. It's the kind of thing that changes how people are treated in their own home. I realize now that there's a cruelty in that which I didn't fully appreciate then. Second, there's a moral arithmetic to these acts that's easy to forget. He stole from us, sure. He disrespected us. But stealing corrupted floppies is not the same as ruining someone's reputation or destroying trust in their family. We escalated the conflict into a space where consequences aren't proportional. Adults react differently than kids. Parents make decisions from fear and love that can be harsh and lasting, and we didn't take that into account. Third, fame among peers for pulling off a great prank is cheap and unreliable. For a while it felt like we'd won. People told the story as some kind of badge of honor. But that's not honor. It's a high school myth that inflates self-image while deflating the humanity of the person you targeted. Eventually, you realize the bragging rights don't feel good. They feel a little hollow and a lot like a wedge between you and who you want to be. After that year, we all moved on. The game's trade dissolved. The kid moved schools at some point, not because of us directly, but because life moves in odd ways. We stopped being petty guardians of our small game economy and started getting into adult things. The memory of the letter, though, stayed with me. It's a story I tell now with a nervous laugh and a disclaimer. We were young and dumb and mean in ways we didn't understand. It's a cautionary tale plastered in nostalgia that if there's a takeaway for anyone listening to this story on a channel or reading it on a timeline, it's this. Petty revenge can feel satisfying, but it often causes collateral damage you didn't intend. More than that, think about who you're aiming at. If your target has a vulnerability or lives inside a system that punishes certain identities, you're crucifying more than just the person who wronged you. You're hitting the people around them, and you're inviting consequences you might not deserve or want. I don't pretend to be holier than thou. We got what we wanted then, a kind of justice as teenagers understood it. But with the benefits of age, I regret the part where we weaponized something that could destroy trust in someone's home. I regret that for a week or two we felt triumphant while someone's parents wept. Not everything you can do means you should do it. Oh, would I tell my younger self to never prank? No, mistakes teach in ways lectures can't. But I'd tell him to marshal the same creativity into something that didn't punch down. Confront the jerk directly. Cover your bases so trading can't be abused. Use public pressure in a transparent way that doesn't involve forging official letters and manipulating family dynamics. If you want to humiliate a thief, make it about the theft. Expose the behavior, document it. Involve fair authority, don't manufacture identity-based evidence. That's the line I'd have tried to sketch for us with the benefit of hindsight. Wrapping this up, the letter worked. It got our point across, and it taught us how quickly small acts ripple into big consequences. It's an old story, one I still tell because it's a snapshot of who I was at that age. Petty, proud, and not yet wise. If you find it entertaining, remember the messy part beneath the punchline. If you find it disturbing, that's fair, so do I now. And if you're watching this on YouTube, maybe pause and think for a second before you pull a stunt that would leave someone's family awake at night.